So, this morning we are exploring the third pathway to discover our deeper, more authentic, more divine selves as we continue the series, What the Mystics Know by Father Richard Rohr. Last week I touched on this idea that God is found in imperfection. God is found in the imperfection of us. And at first, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. If God is this perfect love, if God is the perfect expression of all there is, then how is God also right there in the midst of imperfection? And yet, what the author invites us to consider, to contemplate, is that it's only through our mistakes, it's through our pain, it's through our struggle that we can experience this unconditional love. Every saint, every mystic, every holy person has made mistakes. We don't always read about those, they just give us the highlights of the good that unfolded, but every human being that's walked this earth has hurt someone, has missed the mark, as we like to call it, which is the Greek word for sin. In fact, this third pathway says that from profound suffering comes great wisdom and joy. I have to tell you that my first reaction was sort of yuck. And then it was like, yay, at least there's some good that unfolds out of it. Last week I had shared that according to Father Richard Rohr, and I will say to you in general, as the book discussions are going and some people are having some issues with some of the things he says, as we say in unity, take what resonates with you, take what feels like something that you want to absorb even deeper and leave the rest. He makes mistakes too. He may see things differently than you. So we're using it as a platform for our own discovery, our own contemplation about how that shows up for us. The ego, that human part of us, that oftentimes is in the driver's seat, that causes us to often live from this state of sin or make mistakes or hurt other people, does so in its desire for three main things. Because the ego wants to, number one, be successful. It's kind of driven into our society, at least here in the West, that that's what we're striving for, is to be successful, to be right. Not many people revel in this idea that they could be wrong, and to be powerful, to feel some sense of control. Whether it's just an illusion or not, we like to feel that we have some sense of control over what's happening in our lives, in our world. There was an interesting analogy that he drew from these three states and these three drivers of the ego. The way he sees it, he thought these were the exact things that Jesus was tempted with when he was in the wilderness. You remember before he started his ministry, he went and he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. I imagine that at the end of that, he's feeling pretty physically and emotionally exhausted. And that's when the devil shows up to tempt him. And the devil first says, well, look, you're powerful. You can turn this stone into bread and satisfy your hunger. And Jesus says, yes, but I'm also remembering we don't live by bread alone. And then he appeals to his ability to have dominion, to have control over everything he sees. It says, you can have all of this. You can have every kingdom as long as you then make me your master. And he has to say no to that too, even though there might be some part of him that would be tempted. And finally, he's like, well, prove everybody right that you are indeed the Son of God, and throw yourself off of this tall building. For God says, I will lift you up. The angels will protect you. And he says, no, we don't tempt in that way. Metaphysically, they can demonstrate for each of us what tempts us, what causes us to miss the mark? What causes us to get embroiled in things that we know are not part of this path of love, and yet we find ourselves right in the midst of it? And oftentimes it is, if you look closely and honestly, that drive to either want to be successful, to be right, or to feel some sense of power and control in our lives. As I was working through and processing what I wanted to share this morning, I was thinking back on the maybe two or three what I would call mystical experiences I've had in my life. And there haven't been many. And the one that came to mind, and maybe a few of you have heard this, was one that I had on my very first trip to Unity Village. It was, I was going there to take classes. I was brand new, had been in Unity for less than 6 months, but had felt this call into some greater uh, participation within this movement. And so I was taking my first week of classes. I went very excited, very enthusiastic. And by the third day, I was having an emotional meltdown. And part of it was driven, in fact, the night that I just totally lost it, because I had lost all control. When I look back, I can see it. I was trying, one of the classes, we were doing this skit and we had to present it on Friday. And every day we would go and practice. And I was in a group with a bunch of creatives. And my type A personality, that was the primary driver back in those days, 20 some years ago, was to want to, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm trying to write it all down in my notebook. And every few minutes they're changing. Oh, whoa, 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 but wait, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I was getting so frustrated with this whole thing because it was, no form was coming to it. It was just a bunch of crazy ideas that kept changing every few minutes. And I'm thinking, well, we've got to present this thing here in a couple of days. We've got to have some form on this. We got to have some structure to it. And they were having none of it. And I got so frustrated that day. And part of it was I felt like I don't really belong here. These people have been at this for a long time. They've had all these amazing experiences. I've had none of it. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I knew nothing about the Bible, even though I grew up as a minister's kid. Except for the stories they told us at Sunday school, I had never studied it. I knew nothing about unity principles. I just felt like I was there as a total fraud. And I was trying to take copious notes in this notebook every class. I was there not even really absorbing. I was just trying to write all of it down so that I could feel like I had some handle on it. And at this rehearsal, I threw my notebook down on the grass. Like, that's it. I walked away. And then later, like 30 minutes later, I was eating dinner and realized that I had never picked my notebook back up. So I went back out to get it, and of course, it is gone. I've never found it. I looked and searched because it had everything. It had what I was supposed to know, what I was going to be tested on. It had what my homework was for that night. I had no recollection. I had just written it down. And I searched for several hours. And by the time I got to the end of this, I couldn't go back to my room because my roommate was the perpetuator of this ever changing skit. She was the primary driver of changing all this. And she had totally irritated and annoyed me to the place where I didn't even want to go into the room with her. So I went to the only place on grounds that was still open at that time of night, and it was the Peace Chapel. It's a little bitty chapel that's open 24/7 on the Unity Village grounds. And I found myself on the floor, thank God, nobody was there, nobody came in, sobbing, just having an absolute meltdown. And I finally got to the place where I said, God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. I think you made a mistake. I don't think whatever that calling was that you implanted in my heart, I think you got the wrong person, because this is not me. I don't fit here. I don't know how to do this. And I am done. And I said, so it's up to you now. I don't know what to do next. So I'm just laying it all out here, and I give up. And it was in that moment of surrender. It was in that moment of knowing that I humanly had nothing to do with resolving this. I had no tools in which to resolve this, that I had my first experience where God, whatever you conceive that to be, where there was an unnatural peace that settled over me. It was like in an instant, in a moment, in a breath, everything just went to this place where I felt loved, connected, assured, supported. I don't know what other words I can even describe it. I just felt home. And as I just allowed myself to breathe into that, I realized I never had any control anyway. What I thought was going to make me happy by being successful had never, I mean, I had this epiphany of none of that stuff matters. What matters is being able to be present, connected, and open to whatever that moment was bringing me, because there was always wisdom if I would allow myself to tap into it. You know, when I look back, I could see each of those temptations are what brought me to that moment. You know, that need to be successful, to be right, to be in control were all drivers that brought me to that divine oneness with God. And it only happened in my surrender, in my willingness to let go of the things that I had held as the most important parts of the way I navigate through life, and allow something mysterious, if you will, unknown, to be what guided me forward. The author says this, he says that in the things that you cannot do anything about, and the things that you cannot do anything with, that do something to you. It is in the situations that you can't do anything about, you can't do anything with, that if you allow it, will do something with you. Because it takes us often to get to that place where we're open enough, where we're willing enough to allow something different to guide and inform us. Father Rohr believes, I don't know if I believe it has to be this way, but I think it has certainly been the way that we've experienced life, that suffering is an integral part of our spiritual journey. For it seems that it is the primary driver in which we can reach that place of surrender, that place of non dual, that place beyond either or, that allows us to live in the space of both and, because that is the place where God lives. And we know we're getting close when we can appreciate the value of something while still knowing its limitations and failures. That is the pathway to forgiveness, is to be in that space where we can give some understanding for what is happening, to be in that place where we can see that both ourselves as well as others have made mistakes as part of their own journey, as part of their own suffering, as part of their own desire to want to manage things in a way that serves them. Much of our struggle, much of our pain, and I want you to hear this, it's not going to be up there, so I just want you to listen to this, comes from our struggle to forgive reality for being exactly what it is right now. Can you hear that? Much of our pain and struggle comes from our inability to forgive the reality for what it is in this moment, from needing life to be different than it is. That's different than striving to bring about change that might serve us. This is about being attached to and needing it to be different than it is. And the more deeply that we enter into this mystery, I'll call it the mystery of our inner Christ. You can call it the mystery of the divine. You can call the mystery of the universe, whatever name you put to it. The thinner the line becomes between pain and joy. Have you ever had an experience where pain and joy were almost identical? No. There is that space that is almost nothing between the two. And we get there oftentimes by being willing to live in the space of no answer. Our ego doesn't like a no answer space. That's not a comfortable place that it wants to hang out. But when we are willing to be in that place where we don't know, I don't have the answer for it, it becomes the very path to greater wisdom. Once the mind has surrendered to the heart, the only important question becomes, am I following the path of God? Am I following the path of love? Am I following the path that my own inner wisdom is guiding me? Not what my head tells me, not what the world tells me, but what my heart tells me. And whether it brings personal happiness or sadness is no longer the primary driver of that. It's not the most important. It's not about always needing to be happy. You know, somebody asked me, so are you happy in this job? Are you happy doing what? And it's an interesting question to answer because this is a hard work to do. There are many days where I wouldn't say I'm happy. It's hard. It's hard to sit with people in their pain. It's hard to be in a space where there's so many people with so many different desires and needs that you're trying to move in one direction. And yet, I know I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So there's a joy in that. It's both. It's not one or the other. So as we move into this time of contemplation, of meditation, this time where we just bring our attention inward, I just want to invite you to explore the question, what is mine to surrender? Or perhaps, what is mine to forgive? That I might tap in to greater wisdom and joy. And so as we just take a moment to sort of disconnect from all of this outer activity, I invite you to just be comfortable right where you are. You might want to close your outer eyes that just lets you focus on your inner heart. For that is the space that we want to be able to move ourselves into in order to hear and see and experience through this lens of love, which is the lens in which that which we call God sees all things through. To be in that place where you're not sure what the answer is, but you're willing, you're open to see what arises when you're willing to just rest. To rest in this inner sanctuary for a moment. And to ask without already knowing what the answer might be. What is mine today, in this moment, to surrender within? Not to surrender outside of myself, but to be willing to say, this isn't working for me right now. I'm willing to let it go. To seek a new way of experiencing it, a new way to understand it. And just simply listen and see what arises. What can I let go of? And just let this resonate through the eyes of your own heart as you go through your activities. Check in every now and then to see how it is that we can move deeper into the mystery in which there is no either or, there is always both and. And as you're ready, you can begin to bring your attention back to this time and space, aware of the sounds in the room, moving and stretching your body if that feels like it will bring you back fully present. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So in the book of Luke, we're told that you will know salvation through the mystery of forgiveness. And in traditional Christianity, when you hear that word salvation, we think that that is how we will be delivered from sin and suffering, usually only through the power of Jesus and your belief in Jesus. But we understand salvation when I say that word. Salvation through forgiveness is really about our willingness to surrender those parts of us that think we know better, those parts of us that are driven by this human life rather than by our divinity, by God's love flowing through us. That is our salvation, because through that pathway we discover greater wisdom, we discover greater love, we discover how to be in the world, but yet not have it destroy us. You know, cosmic or spiritual joy really is not about being happy in the sense that our humanness likes that sensation, that feeling of being happy. This cosmic joy is something that you participate in, but it comes from somewhere else and it flows through you. You are simply a channel for it. You aren't creating it, and it can't be diminished. It can only be accepted. And it has little or nothing to do with how well things are going in your life. It has nothing to do with how successful or happy or in control or orchestrated our life seems to be unfolding. The mystics who've traveled this path would rejoice in the midst of suffering. That seems like a mystery on its very own. How can you feel a sense of joy when you're right in the midst of suffering? It's almost unthinkable, and yet that's what these who have traveled this journey before us would tell us is the pathway to really live and have our being from our eternal place. I love this quote that Father Rohr put in there. It says, "The spirit of truth will always set you free, but first it will make you miserable. It will disturb you. It will challenge you. It will push you. It will pull you. And yet, in the midst of it all, is the opportunity for real joy. And until we can reach that place where the line between suffering and joy becomes imperceivable, we can take meaning and hope in knowing that God is participating with us. There's no place we can go where that energy of love is running after us saying, hey, try this. The suffering of Jesus tells us that God is not apart from the trials of humanity. God is not aloof or separate. God is not a mere spectator. God is not merely tolerating this human suffering. God is participating in it with us. I invite you to contemplate that. Wait. Well, it is our opportunity now to share of our financial good with this community. It is through your gifts and love offerings that we continue to do the work that we are called to do. In just a few moments, the ushers are going to invite you to come up row by row. And as you do, you can bring your gift and place it in the large basket. And then we want to be in that flow of giving and receiving, so we also invite you to take an affirmation, or this series, there are something to contemplate that Spirit's chosen just for you to take with you this week. And even if you give electronically or this is not your Sunday to share, we just invite you to come and be in the flow and to remember all the ways in which you do support this community. You can use one of the cards that you find in the little pockets in front of you, or you can just simply place your hand over the basket and add your energy of love and abundance to it. So let us take what we offer today into our hands and into our hearts and bless it. Together, divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Father, Mother God. Discover that peace in the joy, we discover that peace in our pain, and we go knowing our prayer for protection. Together, the light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.